listener. It's your dynamic duo of creativity and co-hosts, Chris.
And Rick. Today on the show, we have Phil Mucci. Creative polymath Phil Mucci began his career as a photographer in New York City, shooting fashion, music, and advertising, featuring a virtual who's who of celebrities from the 90s and beyond. After his first two short films, The Listening Dead and Far Out, gained worldwide recognition, Phil moved to Los Angeles to pursue filmmaking. He wrote, directed, and animated a string of award-winning hard rock and heavy metal music videos for bands like Metallica, Disturbed, Korn, Opeth, and High on Fire. His original screenplay for Season of the Bitch won the Final Draft Big Break competition for Best Horror Thriller of 2019, and the following year, he released his first graphic novel, Murder Vibes from the Monster Dimension, launching the occult adventures of Professor Dario Bava. He's currently finishing two new graphic novel series, Orgy of the Blood Freaks and Gringo Loco, while continuing his work in film and video. Welcome to the show, Phil. Thank you so much for being here. And to start off, we'd love to hear about your origin story. How did your creative journey begin?
Well, like most of the guys who've spoken so far on the show, it kind of began when I was a kid. I had a real interest in art and writing when I was young. And I had a few early successes that made me feel good about myself and like wanted to keep doing art. In middle school, there was a writing workshop that I got to do, and I wrote a poem. It was called The Thing Called Santa Claus. The guy who ran this workshop for creative kids put it on his dial-a-poem. This is before the internet. I'm old, everybody. And The Thing Called Santa was like the most popular poem on dial-a-poem in Albany, New York. It was really a big feather in my cap at a young age.
Okay, I'm not supposed to interrupt you, Phil. Wait a minute. Albany, New York?
Yeah.
Schenectady.
Oh, wow. My mom lives in Schenectady right now.
Yeah, okay. This is small world stuff, man. For like 4 people listening knows where that is. Anyways.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a good place to go to public school, actually, because they had great public schools all in that area, upstate New York, you know. So I had that little bit of early taste of success in like 5th or 6th grade of like, my poem's on dial-a-poem. People were like, what is dial-a-poem? I mean, but I kept doing like writing and artwork through middle school and high school. And I had the privilege of being like in state like art shows and stuff of talented young kids. And I also had the added benefit of having my work stolen from those shows at a young age. I learned the futility of making art at a tender age, like before I was 16. Like I had a sculpture that was part paper mache and part soft sculpture for the head made with nylon stockings and stuff. This space troll with a laser gun and shit. And somebody stole the head that was the soft sculpture from the art show. And I had also at that same show, I had a mixed media painting and sculpture that was in a big wooden frame of this like very Ralph Bakshi inspired like Black Rider on a lizard monster. And in the foreground was all clay and like brush that I had put in there 3D. He was like a matte painting on the back of this sculpture. And that got stolen as well. And I was like, man, that sucks. And they're like, dude, it sucks. You're young though, and that's kind of cool. Maybe this means like you're talented. Maybe this people liked your stuff enough to steal it. And I was like, okay, yeah, you know, but that doesn't really help, you know, you really appreciate it that much. But I did take that as a little another feather in my cap. I'm like, okay, somebody liked my shit enough to steal it. That's great, you know. I'll move on. And I did another thing in high school, a big pencil drawing, you know, 11 by 17 pencil drawing that was in a show at a mall. And that got stolen too. The only thing that got stolen in that art show from my high school at the mall was my drawing. When you're young, it's your parents telling you you're good and you're great and everything. But having all your stuff stolen once you're developing, that kind of tells you that too, you know, in a weird way. And it just fueled the hunger in me. Like, art is not permanent. Art goes into the world and then something else happens to it. And I got really excited about like, I'm just going to keep making stuff. If I keep making stuff, it's just going to keep going out there, and like, who knows what could happen. And I like making stuff. I took encouragement from it instead of discouragement, which would have been the easiest thing to do, be like, oh fuck, I can never show anybody what I did. But my thought was immediately like, well, I'm going to make more things, that I can show people that I did. Just saying that out loud makes me think like, wow, that was pretty advanced thinking for a kid back then. I'm like, I didn't really realize the struggles that were ahead pursuing art and pursuing like making stuff, because that was the thing. I was like, I don't care. I just want to keep making things. That I say that now, I say that to this day. I keep saying that mantra. So I wanted to go to film school because I had been writing and doing artwork. And I was like, I want to go to film school, Mom and Dad. And I wanted to go to NYU Film School. But they found out, even though I was a straight A student in the advanced placement program, they found out I had been smoking weed on our summer vacation that year before my senior year. And they're like, there's no way you're going to NYU. That's in Washington Square Park. You're going to be doing drugs. No way. So I'm like, okay. So I went to the Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University, which was a really cool school. And I actually got a partial scholarship there in a advanced placement essay contest on how would you fight the war on drugs. I was like, legalize weed. And they gave me money for saying that.
He probably had as much weed as New York City did.
I know. That's the irony. It didn't matter. But when I went to school at Syracuse, I got into the most difficult undergraduate writing workshops you could get into. There were only 2. And usually people didn't get into them. And freshmen almost never got into them. And I got into both those programs my freshman year. They were both taught by published authors, Douglas Unger and Tobias Wolff. And they were amazing workshops for writing. And I'm a freshman and I'm writing, just all this crazy stuff inspired from horror films and sci-fi movies. This is the end of the 80s. I'm like, there's so much cool, crazy stuff I've seen by this point in my life that I'm really inspired with, like the supernatural. And also, I was big into Kurt Vonnegut and the kind of using genre as a social commentary and satire and stuff like that. So both of my writing teachers, which was funny, it's another hindsight thing, but at the end of each semester, both of my writing teachers not only recommended me to read other people's work from the workshop, but they both said to me, do not study writing. Whatever you do, don't study writing. You already can write. You just need to live your life. Like, find something that you're interested in beyond writing and study that. Because if you study writing in college, it's just going to ruin your writing. Like, one guy was like, I studied newspaper writing at a communication school just like this. And it really narrowed my perspective and forced me into a style that took me years to break once I left school. And I was like, oh, wow, that seems like pretty good advice. And then the next semester, I took the other workshop, and Tobias Wolff said the same thing to me, basically, not the newspaper part, but he was like, you don't need to keep studying writing or doing workshops. You have an aptitude for language. We can see that. You just should do other things and let that feed your writing. That was pretty interesting advice, and I kind of took it because it came from 2 guys who I really respected, and those were really intensive workshops. And so I decided I would just study, because I still was interested in doing film. I was like, well, I'm going to study. They don't have really a film program here, but I'm going to study photography and photo illustration. I'm going to learn lighting, and I'm going to learn color and composition in that medium, so that I'm more prepared when I go to New York or LA or whatever that I'm going to do after school, that I'll be prepared. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it was kind of a euphemism for, photo illustration was kind of a euphemism for advertising photography. And you're basically learning how to be this technician, a real artisan, because I got a job before I even left college at a local photo studio because I was recommended by my professor to this guy. And I was shooting catalogs and grocery store flyers before I graduated from college. And I was developing film in a a tiny dark room in his studio in Syracuse. And I was like, okay, this is cool. I have a girlfriend who's like a year younger than me. I'll just work this job for a little while. and hang out with her. And she's from New York, so I'll just move to New York with her when she's done. And I did that. And as soon as I moved to New York, she dumped me. Which is like lesson learned, young man. But I was in New York. I got there. I got there on my own, and I had experience enough that as a freelance photo assistant, I could get a lot of work. Because once somebody hired me once, it would be like, well, we'll take you on for a day for free. And if, because this is very much an apprenticeship thing. This is New York in the 90s. This is a very intensive photo environment. You hustle or you die, like that kind of thing. And once I got hired, people really liked me and really liked working with me. And a really big established photographer who was an alumni of Syracuse University, Eric Miola, who had interviewed me before and really liked me and offered me a job before I moved there. He kept hiring me as a freelancer and was like, I want you to come on full time. I want you to come on full time. And I'm like, I don't want to be a full-time assistant. It's great. I'm in New York City. I'm in my 20s. It's the 90s. I'm having a blast, dude. I mean, I get to travel and work with all these different crews and have fun. It was an amazing time. But eventually the deal got nicer and better. And it wasn't a full-time photo assistant. It was a studio manager. So then I became a studio manager for Eric Miola, who is this huge established advertising photographer in New York and really known for his color stuff. And he was still doing a lot of color and photography work with like duping stations and different enlargers set up next to each other and using filters on things. And he was just getting into Photoshop like at that time, because this is the early 90s and it's starting to come of age and a lot more photographers are learning to use it. I loved photography effects because I was a movie kid, and I loved special effects and Ray Harryhausen, miniatures in front, and I loved all that stuff. And I loved learning how to do it and pull it off. So at first I was a little resistant to the computer, but once I worked for Eric and took the job, he kept making the offer better and better. So I took it. And I became studio manager there. He had like the top people come in and train me kind of in Photoshop. And it was like, I was telling you, Chris, when we talked the first time, I was like, yeah, I started on 2. And I remember when 2.5 came out in Photoshop, and it was just this revolution of like, oh my God, things are really changing. And I got into Photoshop a lot then. And I started developing my own style and look in photography using digital, but still using the same effects and sort of practical stuff that I loved, that I kind of studied in school. And, I was happy to leave the lab behind because, working in a dark room and stuff, it's not really that much fun. It's more glamorous in movies than it is in real life. But I really developed my own look. And part of my deal with Eric to take the full-time job there was like, I have access to the studio whenever you're not in there, and you have to pay for my film processing. Any of the stuff that I'm going to spend of your expendables and inventory, you're just going to cover that. That's what you're going to do for me to take the job. And he accepted that. Once he saw sort of how much I was working there on the weekends, he was kind of like, oh man, this is a lot, Phil. I mean, do you really need to shoot that much stuff? And it's like, hey dude, this is the deal you made, man. And I built a portfolio out of that. And there were people that worked with us because Eric is a wonderful artist and photographer, but I was more personable with the clients and the art directors and stuff. So I ended up getting a lot of play with them. And if there was something he didn't want to do, they'd be like, hey, Eric, would it be cool if Phil did, worked on this with us? And I started building a book that way and got some recognition. And eventually I left Eric Miola's studio and started out kind of on my own. And I did a lot of editorial work, which was still very big back then. So I did, magazine covers and fashion stories and music stuff. I did stuff for AP, Alternative Press. I did a ton of stuff for them. I did stuff for like Complex, and there were Herb, the LA magazine Herb, URB. And that got me into like more and more sort of music industry stuff at first, but also a mix of music and fashion editorial that was different because there weren't a lot of people doing these. I mean, I was doing fashion stories that looked like Blade Runner, like totally illustrated Blade Runner cityscape craziness stuff. And that started getting me more and more attention. And I developed a style that eventually led me to become a very big commercial advertising photographer. There was a big lull when 9/11 happened in New York because I was there. I was just married, and the work dried up for a while, and I used that time kind of to develop some different techniques and different styles that once the work started coming back in, I started using those, and I got the attention of like Mark Echo. I did a bunch of Echo Unlimited campaigns that were national. And then Mark Echo introduced me to the owner of Skechers. And then I did a bunch of ubiquitous Skechers campaigns I was the agency and the photographer and the design studio with my entire team of artists who I had hired at that time, because I had a staff by this point. I had a staff. I was paying for health insurance and all the legit stuff that you do when you get really big. And I had a billboard in Times Square at one point, from Skechers. It was crazy. It was sort of a dream come true, but I realized at that time that it wasn't really what my dream was. Like, I hadn't really reached what I wanted to do. Like, I could see that it was affecting my relationship. I could see that staying in the hustle and doing advertising was not fulfilling me creatively. And I felt like I could do more than sell Skechers knockoff sneakers to people. Like, I didn't want my work to like amount to that, and that's that. Because I mean, I have a subversive streak in me, but I don't begrudge anyone who makes a living from working in advertising. I was just realizing it wasn't for me, and I was getting really about it, and my health was suffering. My marriage broke up. Like, it was just too much work and too much pressure, and it kind of imploded, and I was like, I know I'm making a ton of money, but I'd rather not. And like, I'd rather do something that it wasn't that I'd rather not make money. It was that I'd rather do something that I felt good about and that satisfied me creatively. And I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing, because as far as I was concerned, it had ruined a lot of things. And there wasn't anything that I felt better about doing, and I couldn't see myself doing it for another 10 years. Because at this point, I'm in my mid-30s, and I was like, you know what? It's time that I make that movie that I've always been wanting to make. And I want, now that I've been divorced and I have some experience in life and a heartbreak and all these other things, but what those teachers told me in college started coming back. Like, write about what you experience and what you know, and through your own lens. And that's how I wrote my first short film, The Listening Dead. At that time, I still had the money from the photography career to put a lot of money into this short film. It was a 15-minute short film. It cost a ton, but we were on location. We did a lot of effects. We had miniatures. I was so proud of it when it was done, and it actually told a story of a married couple of artists whose relationship broke up. But as a silent film, as a black and white film, very visual, as a metaphor for the fact that by the end, me and my wife weren't really hearing each other. We weren't communicating. It was just a bad time because there was so much pressure with the business that I was running. And that kind of just opened all these new doors for me. It was like a short film that went out, and I had the money to promote it then too and go to film festivals. I traveled all over with it. I really felt like I had come of age. Like, I was like, this is where I should have been a long time ago. I should have committed to this much earlier. Like, what have I done with my life? That kind of thing. But it was really fantastic. At the same time, I turned around and made another short film right after that. That went on to more film festivals, and it played on the Sundance Channel for 2 years. And it was just a big boon to me. I got a film deal, actually. That's what brought me out to LA. I was still in New York at the time, but after my second short film, I got contacted by these writers and a producer who had a film, a screenplay that they were really ready to greenlight, but they needed a director, and they needed a director to put a spin on the script because they didn't think they could afford what they'd written, kind of thing. I took a crack at it, and I will let everybody know so they can look up the movie that I didn't end up directing. Spoiler alert. It was called The Knights of Badassdom, and it was about cosplayers in a sort of fantasy cosplay event, recreation event, or whatever they call those things, where they actually go out into the woods and fight monsters and demons. It's D&D live kind of thing. And I put a whole spin on the script, and I was very proud of it. And me and my friend Ian sold all my photo equipment. We moved to Los Angeles because we were like, We don't trust these guys to like, if we're on this movie, because we had already signed the contract. I had an agent, manager, lawyer, fully geared up. I'm like, I don't want to stay in New York and let them do their own thing. Let's go out there. And we came out and we worked on it for another several months. And then it was the big recession. It was 2008. It was the beginning of 2008. Everybody's getting fired. My agent gets fired. My manager gets fired. I decide that I'm not going to do that project because the budget is still too high on the screenplay that they greenlit. But I was already moving on to other people. I was meeting with Wes Craven on a script that he had. I felt like, okay, this is an opportunity. Everything's changing again. I'm going to pivot again. Like, I'm going to leave this one behind and go do this. But all that stuff sort of fell through as well. A little bit of overconfidence and also misjudging the economic climate that devastated a lot of LA at that time. So I was at Anonymous Content as my management, and they shifted me to the music video division. They're like, right now, you're not going to be directing shit. We've got music videos, and you've already worked in music. You did the ludicrous Chicken and Beer album cover. We can get you hip hop. We can get you pop music. We can get you rock and roll. I'm like, I want heavy metal. I want horror. I need some stuff like that. You know, like I want to do the stuff that I want to do. If I'm going to make movies, even if they're little short music videos, I want to make the kind of stuff that I want to make. That's where it began, kind of with my music video career. I think I wrote like 48 treatments before I even got one music video. It was like that kind of just like constantly trying to get recognized, do something. But once I did, that became another part of my career. I started doing videos where I didn't even have to compete with other directors to write them. They were just like, we want you to do a music video. Here's the song. Tell us what you want. Give us an estimate. And that was great. And I did some really awesome stuff that I'm very proud of. And I got to express creatively, you have your influences, and like someday I want to do something like that. I got to do that like over and over and over again. And it was really, really fun to finally let loose and like, I'm going to do a sci-fi one. I'm going to do a horror one. I'm going to do a weird stoner one for High on Fire. You know, it's going to be this total pot apocalypse thing. It's going to be amazing. And I had a real blast doing that until it became music videos used to have budgets because there was advertising attached to them on MTV. And then when that ended and slowed down, the budgets got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So you had to either put money into it to do what you wanted or just keep getting like lowering the production value more and more and more. And, you know, I took on a lot of animating myself, which is a terrible thing to try to do with music videos because it's too much work for one person to do. But I did that for a few videos and I was like, guys, I can't do this anymore. We had started our own production company at that point just to keep the money, because a production company takes a piece of anything you do. Even on a low budget music video, they take a chunk. So we were like, okay, well, we're done with you. We're starting our own production company. We're calling it Diabolic because I love that movie, Danger Diabolic. And this is our way that we're going to go. And sure, they'll give us very little money, but we'll scrape it together and we'll work with our tight team. It just got to a point where I felt like it wasn't moving the ball anymore, especially in terms of, we used to get awarded like best heavy metal video of the year and stuff like that. There was still a online audience for music videos and rankings and stuff like that. But even that started ending. There was no upside at a certain point. I decided like, well, I want to move forward. It's still doing film, but I gotta learn to write long form, because I've been writing narrative videos that were very short, but they told the whole story, but that was a very like narrow specific thing, and there's no dialogue. You're basically writing a silent film every time. So I did cheat and add like little intros that had like dialogue in some of my videos, but I decided, you know, I'm going to start writing. I'm going to write a screenplay, and I did. I wrote a screenplay, Season of the Bitch, spread that around, submitted it to the Final Draft like awards. I won an award, best horror thriller screenplay, my first like official screenplay out in the world. I was like, sick. And we tried to pitch Professor Dario Bava, which was a character from a music video we did. And I made a little 2-minute animated teaser of that and started pitching that and realized like, we got to make this thing more real for people because it's a big world and we want to make people see it so that at a pitch meeting, it's not just me telling a little brief story. They've got a whole thing to look at, and they're freaking out on every page. I decided, like, well, now I'm going to start making graphic novels. I don't know how. I don't know why. I don't know what you do to do this, but I'm going to start doing it because I like this graphic novel. I like that graphic novel. I love Richard Corbin. I love Dan Brereton. And this is a crazy kind of world that I think if we could show people tons of storyboards and comic pages and panels, they're going to totally love it. They're going to dig it. And then I set to work doing it. And my production company agreed with me, which was crazy because they're like, you've never done this before. Well, you know, you're in your 40s. What, you're going to start making comic books now? I mean, what the hell? You know, it's kind of nuts. I'm like, yeah, but guys, come on, let's do it. We all love this character. Why don't we just go for it? So I set to work writing Murder Vibes from the Monster Dimension, which was the first Professor Dario Bava graphic novel. And I worked with a great artist that our producer Dan Simpson found, Mike Dubish, who really didn't know how to deal with me at first. We had a lot of conflict, but it took a while and we had problems with it. He was originally going to color the book and pencil and ink it, and that was just too much because it was like 72 pages and it was insane. So then he tried to get other guys to color it, and he didn't like what they were doing. And we were a year in on the project, and I was like, okay, guys, I've designed movie posters. I've worked in Photoshop since I was in my 20s. I think I can figure out how to color a graphic novel. I don't think it can be that hard compared to what I've done all these years. I mean, I've got 25 years of experience in digital artwork and compositing. And so I decided, like, to save money, I would be the guy who's going to color the graphic novel. Huge mistake, but I really learned a lot. The first book, I still look at and I'm like, what was I thinking? But I got way better on the second book. And then Gringo Loco, like, COVID hit when our first graphic novel came out. This is bringing us up to the current point. Murder Vibes from the Monster Dimension, we got it from the printer end of February 2020. And then by 2 weeks into March, it was locked down in LA. We had all these books, and we're like, we can't do conventions, we can't go out to events, we can't go to comic shops, everything's closed. You know, we sent it out to all of our backers. So I pitched to my team, I'm like, well, this is probably going to last for a while, you guys. It's looking pretty bad. Why don't we just keep making comic books? I mean, what else are we going to do? Let's go. Let's take the Orgy of the Blood Freaks kind of original series Bible that I had for Professor Dario Bava, and I'm just going to adapt it into a graphic novel form. We'll do 3. And I have this other idea that I really love that I've had for 10 years, Gringo Loco. Why don't we just make that part of the book to introduce that character? And they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. What about the artist? I'm like, well, we'll get a different artist for that book. That way they can work at the same time. And then I can just color everything as it comes in. And then we could put them both together in like a flip book kind of thing, like a double feature. We can introduce a new character. And that's what we ended up doing. It's pretty much current times. I mean, we just ran a campaign for the second book in the double feature series, and it was our best crowdfunding campaign ever. So we've gotten a little bit of success going on these stories. I've just gotten a call to do another music video. We'll see what happens with that now that things are kind of opening up again. But that's the quick and dirty, which was what, a half an hour?
But a damn good half an hour. Sure, wait a minute. Are you sure, Bill, you and I aren't brothers from the same mother, like Lost? like almost the same childhood and how we got here. And any man that loves Mario Bava movies is like my ultimate.
Oh my God.
Amazing story, Phil. Thank you for walking us so comprehensively through the very early origin stories of where you were all the way to now. And what I couldn't help but notice is you make this seem so natural. Like the number of pivots and how you're going from writing to ad photography over to short film to feature film to music videos over to a production company, then back to writing and then graphic novels and now like comic coloring. How do you think about navigating all of those ups and downs throughout your career?
It's easier to look at it in hindsight. At the time, each pivot, if you want to call it that, was sort of seemed like the way to keep making stuff. I love the creative process. You know, I have ideas. I have things I want to do. I have things I want to try. And even when I get down, and there are times where I've gotten really down, it is thinking about the work and doing the work that brings me back up. It's like one of the things that I disagree with that some people say. Stephen King, I listened to his book on tape about writing a couple times over COVID, because I was also doing a bunch of writing then, and I liked his like personal stories and stuff. But one of the things I disagreed with him about is he's like, he doesn't keep a writer's journal. And he's like, a writer's journal is just a record of bad ideas. And I don't agree with that, because I find that I keep tons of notebooks. You know, I have a lot of notebooks, and most writers and artists I know, I mean, I actually did Murder Vibes from the Monster Dimension in one of these books, you know, one of the simple composition books. You know, I didn't even realize, oh, like I should probably get a sketchbook if I'm going to doodle all these panels in it, you know. But the process of actually writing or drawing or sketching begets more ideas and more art. And every time I put a pen to paper and I write down some dumb idea or something that's disposable, maybe, I don't really judge myself for it. I give myself a lot of room to suck and make mistakes, because I find that the act of actually writing it down and looking at it and continuing to write or continuing to sketch, ideas beget ideas. Creativity and art begets more art. And as long as you give yourself the room to screw up and to, yeah, record a bunch of bad ideas, you may pick up that book again later and be like, oh, that's bad. I phrased that wrong. This is how it should be. You know, like all that stuff kind of helps. And like, to me, that lifts my spirits. Because, yeah, it is really easy to give up and be like, well, okay, that was that. I've got to go now. I'm going to start serving coffee and helping out my mom full time. This is the end of my life. I had a good run, but I don't let myself go to there, because you have to be precious about your own drive and your own feelings and emotions as a creative person, I think, too. You have to give yourself that honor. You have to honor yourself that much. And I don't think anything that I've done like makes me deserve that. But I think as a human being, I earn, you know, I deserve that myself. So I try to keep the work in the forefront of my mind. If I didn't care about it, it would be harder to do. But I do care about it, and I'm proud of the things that I've done. And even if it's a bad time, like 9/11 was a really bad time in New York. Post 9/11 was a really bad time. And I was married, and we were both like kind of out of work. We kind of like just used that time to like connect and to make new things and to work on our own stuff. And if you can have that impulse without any regard for like the reward of doing it, it's the process of doing it. I've listened to the first 3 podcasts, so I know that that's a common theme. Kind of is the truth. You know, it's like I gain so much from the act of being creative that it has become its own reward at this stage in my life. As long as I can keep making things, I'm okay. I'm not going to allow the shifting tides of things, because it is a very sort of crazy world, and it seems like crazier every year. We've lived through so many things in this time period that is unique. You had a pandemic, first in 100 years, all kinds of insanity. And the only thing that you can stick to, kind of in my case, has always been like, yeah, I have a will to create. I want to make things, and I want to do things. I know people who it's not enough for, and I can appreciate that. Like, we live in a very tough time, and it's difficult, but I take so much from doing the work myself. It fuels me so much that it's not that much of an issue to me. I mean, the pivots are like, don't be afraid to suck, and also don't be afraid to make mistakes that you can learn from too. Because I thought at the time doing a graphic novel, I'm like, oh, I'm not qualified, you know, I'm too old. I don't know enough about it. but I just did it anyway, and I finished it. Finishing things, seeing things to the end, even if they're terrible, even if you're going to look back on it, as I have a couple years later. I look back on my first graphic novel and I'm like, ooh, you know, maybe I shouldn't have lettered that. Maybe I shouldn't have colored that myself, because I don't like things about it. But at the same time, that was me then. That was the thing that I did then. That is a record of my life then. This is what I creatively put out there then. And it wasn't for advertising. It wasn't for a record label. It wasn't for a band. It wasn't for any other concern. It was just a thing that I put out there to be like, hey, check this out. So everything that you finish is a milestone in your life. It is a marker of who you were then when you finished that. And that person then had the guts and determination to finish that thing. And that gives me confidence and hope.
Oh, dude, that was the best sentence in the world, right? And I bet a lot of people can relate to that feeling. I want to do two things quick before I get to the question. And I think part of the reason you have this attitude is you were very lucky in your early age when you talked about people stealing stuff. And when I went to college, if my professor liked your stuff, he would use his stick to talk about the part he liked, and he would put a hole in it. If he didn't like it, he burned it. Which is like stealing. And we had people who dropped out, and he kept saying, if you can't handle this, you can't handle anything. So you were very lucky at an early age to, it instantly detached the mine thing from it.
Yeah.
But it's still yours, right? Which I think helped you, this is me reading into it, sorry, which lets your creative, I call it the creative itch, and I stole the term. Like, I got to do this, I got to do this. Like, that's part of your whole story. You keep telling, like, I'm not happy doing this. Yeah, I'm making money, but I have a creative itch to go this way, right? I want to do this. So what I'm interested in is, what are the things outside of what you're doing that influence you? I mean, you already talked about Mario Bava and the Obelisk, which is, for anybody out there, see the movie. It's done on such a low budget and you wouldn't know it, right?
Yeah, it's great.
It's so beautiful.
It's visually so much fun. Yeah, and inventive. Yeah,
and inventive, right? So what are the things like that that have influenced you and pushed you, you know, to that make you creatively?
It's so hard to get specific at my advanced years, but because so many things have become influential. I do remember, like, the earliest thing was, and this is kind of a cliche, but men of a certain age.
It's cliche.
I saw, you know, Star Wars when it first came out, the original Star Wars. And my parents took it to me over and over, because I was a kid. I was really young, and I just loved it. I ate it up. It was the coolest thing ever. And I remember it was probably the fifth or sixth time I saw it in a theater, because it played in theaters for years. People don't realize this. It was like, this is before video. Like, you would just go to the local dime theater and see Star Wars again on a matinee. And I saw at the end of it, written and directed by George Lucas. And I was like, some dude did this? What? Some one guy? Right? I learned later, like, yeah, that's a big honorable title, but he worked with an entire crew of people. But it stuck in my head, like, written and directed by this person. And I was like, wow, you could do that. Some person, that's what I want my job to be. I want that to be my job. Write and direct something amazing that's going to just blow everybody's mind, and it's going to be an incredible thing. Because I took so much inspiration from that movie, because there had been nothing really like it. There had been cheesy sci-fi on TV that you'd seen a bunch of times, but that movie was just like, holy shit, what the hell is this? It was really a game changer. Now everything is still trying to mimic Star Wars, but that kind of success and that kind of world building. But to me, at a young age, that was a huge inspiration, and one that stuck with me for till now. You know, like that has stuck with me a very long time. And then in terms of, you know, film, as I got older, I embraced a lot of other filmmakers, and especially Dario Argento, Mario Bava, things like that. and I got into and Hammer horror when I was young. When cable came out and we had cable TV and we're watching cable and stuff, these were on all the time. Kids were watching like Saturday morning cartoons, GI Joe and shit, and I'm watching Creature Double Feature.
Creature double feature out of Boston and New York. I'm with you. Those are the biggest influences as my childhood. I'd get mad. My dad would go, "We got to go shopping." No. It's Saturday. Creature double features now.
Exactly. I love that. I watched it all the time, like religiously, because you'd see like, I mean, there'd be buxom vampire babes, and there'd be, you know, Peter Cushing as Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, sometimes good, sometimes bad. You know, it was just, you know, Christopher Lee too, man. Jesus Christ. Like, I loved all that stuff, and that stuck with me as well. And it's been a permanent, you know, kind of fixture in my life. And then later on, it was other filmmakers and comic book artists, Richard Corbin, Heavy Metal magazine. I had subscriptions to that as soon as I got to college, and, you know, my parents weren't looking at anything. I would get Heavy Metal all the time. And I had it into my 30s. I had a subscription to Heavy Metal magazine and all the artists in there, especially Richard Corbin. I bought a bunch of his graphic novels. I actually based the size of our books on Richard Corbin's Edgar Allan Poe graphic novel and his Sinbad graphic novel that came out, which was a compilation of his work. And then later I got into Dan Brereton's like Nocturnals, because that was a book that was written and painted by the artist. And he literally, the panels of that book are painted. Like, it's not somebody penciling and inking and then somebody else coloring it. It's Dan Brereton doing every goddamn thing in that book. And that really blew me away. I was like, holy shit, like, that's crazy. That's nuts. I mean, how long did this take? This is an art book. How can you have this on a shelf? Like, this needs to be it needs to be in a museum. I was that impressed by that kind of art. And I got lucky too, because I think another thing that inspired me was technology, because when I started with photography, it was the dark room and special effects in camera. I had Kodalith masks and a 4x5 camera doing dual exposures and stuff. And then a computer came along and I was like, oh, here, you can do it way faster, dude. And I was like, oh, great. And then as I started getting more into photography and digital photography, it became exactly. He's doing the burning and dodging on the, and then digital video started coming out. I was like, oh shit, okay, great. So I don't need to have a whole studio. I can actually start experimenting right now with film. And I did. I just started experimenting with my film crew that I had. A bunch of, you know, I had my biggest staff was about 7 people full time. But yeah, I'd be like, okay, no, final cuts out, let's get that. Let's get more cameras. Let's try some stuff. You know, let's see how these digital video looks. And so that was also an inspiration to me as I moved through this time period, was that technology was kind of like always there to like make the next step a little bit easier. I think AI is one of those ones that kind of ruins it, but we'll see. It's already in all kinds of software that I use. It's built in. Adobe's putting it in there to help you with other things. But the generative AI that's based on an artist's prompt, like, I want it to look like Van Gogh, you know, like that stuff I'm really not into at all. And I don't think it should be, you know, I think it's kind of terrible. But in general, technology has been a thing that has also helped me, you know, because I wasn't ever afraid of it. I wrote game programs when I was a kid because I was always into writing. So I'd write these like sort of story-based, you know, choose your own adventure games way back in the day. And you just read the text and then you make a choice, yes or no. Do you go left and right? And then it would be a whole different subplot. So I think adapting to what's out there kind of helped me too, in terms of staying inspired, because there wasn't a barrier to entry that there used to be. Once digital technology took off, I think it liberated a lot of us to try things that we wouldn't have been able to afford to try before. Like, the barrier to entry was dropped a little bit, and that really inspired me moving forward.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Especially now, where the barrier to entry to so many things is so low because of technology. You have more and more competition in some ways, because you're not getting, like you're saying with the dark room photography, it takes up space, it's hard, there's chemicals, like it's not something anyone just like picks up and decides to do usually. And so given that it's so easy to create things now, the competition levels are higher. What would you tell a creative who is just starting out now, like regardless of age, but maybe they're now at a point where they're like, I want to start telling my own stories. I want to start making my own things, but I'm just worried about, like I don't have the industry experience that say maybe you had going from winning music video awards and having these big billboards in Times Square. I'm just some random dude. What would you tell that person?
I would say a lot of what I've said, but the main thing is keep going, keep true to yourself and keep going. Pursue your interests. Do not worry about the response from the world. We're kind of now programmed to react to likes and clicks and all these things on social media. Those things I find generally to be a distraction to finishing the work and doing the work. And if you chase those things, you're not being true. You're not being an artist. You have to pursue what you're interested in. You have to do the things that you're interested in and stay focused on them. Don't be afraid. This is what I've said already, but if you're going through hell, keep going. Don't be afraid to suck. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's the best way to learn is to bite off more than you can chew. Try something you've never tried before. Do not listen to the feedback, because even me, I can't look at YouTube comments or things like that because it definitely affects me, and it shouldn't affect me. Like, it shouldn't affect any of us. Can't cater to the lowest common denominator in the world. And right now, a lot of people who can't do what you can do as a creative, as an artist, as a talent, they make up for that by trashing what you do and by belittling you. And they take some sort of joy from that in this current world that we live in, of this sort of social media quagmire. It's destructive. I think it's destructive to your creative spirit. And you need to nurture that spirit. If you do want to continue making art, and if you do want to do it regardless of the benefits or the fame or anything, because you can't do it for those reasons. Those are not real reasons to do. You're not doing art at that point. You're performing. You're just kind of delivering what you think people want. And that's not being an artist. That's not being creative. You have to create a space for yourself that you can just create and not worry about any of that stuff. It's very hard now, and there's a lot of pressure to, like, I think the third guy you interviewed on the episodes, he's talking about your brand and becoming a brand. I don't think that's necessarily that helpful, because if you're starting out, I don't know how helpful that is even once you're doing your own thing, sustaining, and you're kind of moving through your creative life, because I never thought about myself that way. And I think it would be a limitation to think of myself that way, because it puts me in these narrow corridors, just like listening to comments on YouTube, just like chasing likes or TikTok follows or other things. Those things are just walls that you're putting yourself into. Those things do not help your creativity. What helps your creativity is doing it and making things. And looking at the thing once you've made it and you've finished it, and you're like, wow, that came out great, or I love that, or like, that is not at all what I thought it was going to be, but well, it's kind of cool. I gotta make another one. I'm gonna make that one, that part of it better, and I'm gonna do, like, you need to give yourself that space. You need to be in your crazy little cave, your madhouse cave, your Pee-wee's Playhouse of fun stuff that you love, that generates your creative spirit. Because I've come to guard that as very precious. I've stopped relationships with people who were too negative, or were too like, why are you doing that? Why? This isn't going to go anywhere. What's the point of doing that? It's like, get the fuck out of here. I don't know, I'm going to do this thing, and you're either, you want to work on it with me or not. If you don't, that's fine. I'll work on the next thing with you if you don't. But collaboration with other artists can kind of help you find that space too. Like, a lot of times we have to work a lot alone, but being at cons and things with your own art, like meeting you, Rick, meeting you, Chris, like that also helps you stay focused, because other artists will come up to you and recognize what you're doing and be like, oh, that's cool what you're doing. You weren't doing it for this person. You never met that person. They don't even follow you on social media. But because of that connection, you feel justified. Or you go into a local art show and some asshole steals all your shit. And then you're like, that is better than 1,000 likes on Instagram right there. Somebody stole my shit. It must be good. But none of that happens if you're hung up on other stuff. You give yourself that space. That wasn't very concise.
No, dude, no, don't, no. I'm sitting over here on mute going, yes, 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 yes. And quick sub story. I was at somebody's house and this girl wanted to be an artist, was asking me a question, and her niece was sitting next to her and she's asking me questions, and she goes, and the niece, who knows, goes, why are you listening to him? He only has 3,000 followers on Facebook or Instagram. I'm like, and I turned to her, this is the problem. Like, do not, it's the best advice. Do not do it for those likes. Do not do it to be 6 million views. Do not, and people are just going to bash you, who are jealous of you. And it's just a negative world. Just best advice, Phil. Swear to God, that was awesome.
Thanks.
Rick's smiling because he agrees with me. And it fits for perfect. Like how, a lot of his meeting people, similar people. That's why I joke, you and I, you're like my long lost brother. I'm just connected to you, and you thing and the movie things and comic things and music things. It's fabulous. And you've been a real inspiration, truly an inspiration to an old man. Like, made me go, okay, now I'm going this way, right? So how can people find you? Like, what do you have going on? How can people connect with you? Because this is the real thing creative people need, as you're saying, instead of the 4 million likes and the bashing. So how do we find you? What's going on in your world?
You can find me on Instagram at Phil Mucci, PhilMucci. And we have at Diabolic with a K, Diabolic, Lik, LLC on Instagram. And the website for the graphic novels is really cool, ProfessorDarioBava.com. And you can see our videos at DiabolicFilms.com. You can always hit the contact button there. I do a bunch of one-on-ones. I've helped college students with their papers. I've done lectures to autistic filmmaker classes. I will get on any podcast and talk to anybody who wants to listen. Like I said, I don't think I'm like the best person to give advice other than what I've said, but I'm always open to talk to people about process or what I've learned so far. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure my way through everything in life, that good stuff, as we all are. But that's the fun. That's the fun of life.
It most definitely is the fun part of life, Phil. This has been amazing. I've learned so much from you already, even after being your booth buddy and picking your brain for like 12 hours at Monsterpalooza. Thank you again. I hope that was such a generous offer to allow people to reach out. I hope people take you up on that, because why not, people? Given that, are there any other last thoughts that you would want our listeners to know?
I think I've covered a lot, but I would say love yourself, believe in yourself, do the work. Don't be afraid to do the work and finish it. You know what I'm talking about. Finish it.
All right, I will. Phil, thank you, man. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Most definitely. Thank you so much, Phil.
Yeah, it was really fun, you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining Rick and myself on another episode of Origins, A Creative Journey, a DesignerCon production. Please like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, download and listen to us every place you get your favorite podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Origins, A Creative Journey, all one word. Drop us an email for thoughts, ideas, or maybe somebody you'd like us to interview at dconpodcast @gmail.com. And make sure you join us in Las Vegas for DesignerCon, North America's premier annual design convention. All the information can be found, including tickets, at designercon.com. Till then, enjoy your own creative journey.